Mara Ellison was asleep with one hand twisted in the sleeve of Julian Vale's shirt. "Don't," she whispered. The word barely made it past her lips. Rain struck the black windows of the Boston Hotel in thin, relentless sheets, turning the city beyond the glass into blurred gold and silver. The suite was dim except for the lamp beside the bed and the pale rectangle of Julian's open laptop on the desk. Julian sat on the carpet a few feet away, still in his loosened tie, one knee drawn up beneath his arm. He had been sorting through printed briefing notes for the past 40 minutes, moving pages into clean, ruthless stacks because Mara had fallen asleep halfway through a sentence and he had not known what else to do with the softness of the room. Her fingers tightened around him. "Don't leave because I'm difficult," she said, more clearly this time. "I know I'm difficult. I know I make everything worse." Julian looked at her hand curled in his sleeve. In the office, Mara Ellison could reduce a room full of executives to silence with 3 questions and a look. She wore composure like other people wore expensive watches, not because she needed to show it off, but because she had learned never to be without it. Now her face was turned into the pillow, her dark hair loose around her cheek, her brows pulled together as if even sleep had become an argument she was trying to win. Julian did not touch her. He did not pull his sleeve free. "You're not making anything worse," he said quietly. The rain kept moving down the glass. Mara's grip loosened by a fraction. "You're just tired." For a moment, Julian thought she might wake. Instead, her breathing changed, slowly deepening beneath the blanket. Her fingers remained hooked around his cuff. Outside, somewhere below them, a taxi hissed through standing water. Julian looked toward the rain-dark window and remembered the hotel lobby less than a day earlier, when Mara had looked at him as if sharing a room with him might be a fate worse than the storm. The lobby clock had read 11:42 p.m. The rain had already found its way inside. It shone on the marble floor in dark half-moons beneath suitcases and dripping umbrellas. Every few seconds, the revolving door groaned open and admitted another wet, exhausted traveler who took one look at the crowded lobby and seemed to understand immediately that there would be no rescue waiting for them upstairs. The woman at the front desk had the expression of someone trying not to cry in front of strangers. "I'm so sorry," she said for the 3rd time. The reservation system duplicated several of the conference blocks. "We had 2 rooms listed for your company, but one of them was released earlier this evening when your arrival time changed." Mara stood across from her in a charcoal suit with rain darkening the shoulders. Her overnight bag rested at her feet. A few wet strands of hair had escaped from the knot at the back of her neck and clung to her jaw. "You released a confirmed room," Mara said. Her voice was calm. "That was always more dangerous than when people raised it." The front desk clerk swallowed. "I understand how it sounds. It sounds like we are in Boston at midnight before a 9:30 client presentation, and you are telling us our rooms disappeared." Julian leaned one elbow against the counter beside her, his own coat soaked through at the collar. He had spent the last 3 hours in a delayed car from Logan after their flight had been cancelled and their replacement flight had been cancelled after that. He had watched Mara negotiate with an airline supervisor, a rental car agent, and one aggressively cheerful hotel shuttle driver without ever allowing herself to look tired. Now she looked tired. Not visibly, not to anyone who did not know how to read the small things. But Julian did. Her right hand had closed around the handle of her suitcase so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. The clerk glanced toward the hotel manager, who was whispering urgently into a phone behind them. "There is 1 suite left," she said. "It is a king suite. 1 bed. 1 sofa." Mara stared at her. Julian could almost hear the precise internal calculation taking place behind her expression. The lobby was full. The storm had grounded flights. Every hotel in Back Bay was sold out because of the tech conference. Their client presentation was less than 10 hours away. The closest reasonable alternative would require crossing half the city in weather that had already turned the roads into mirrors. "There must be something else," Mara said. "I checked every partner property within 5 miles. She can sleep in the suite," Julian said. I'll take the sofa. Mara turned toward him. No. The word landed hard enough that the clerk blinked. Julian kept his face neutral. Mara. I'm not sharing a suite with you. Then I'll sleep in the lobby. It seems less restful, but the decorative ferns are surprisingly judgmental. This isn't funny. No, he said, more quietly. It isn't. The rain hammered the street-facing windows. Mara's jaw tightened. I can take a car back to the airport. The airport is closed. I can wait there. And arrive at the presentation tomorrow looking like you fought a baggage carousel for ownership of your soul. She gave him a look sharp enough to qualify as a weapon. Julian turned back to the clerk. It's our mistake, he said easily. We changed flights twice. You did what you could. The clerk looked relieved enough that it almost embarrassed her. It wasn't your mistake, Mara said. I know, Julian said. He took the keycard from the counter before the clerk could offer it again. Then he reached down, lifted Mara's overnight bag from beside her suitcase, and picked up his own with his free hand. Mara looked at him. I can carry my own bag. I know. Then give it back. In the elevator. Why? Because this lobby has several people pretending not to listen to us, and I would hate for them to miss the part where you threaten me with a wheelie bag. Her eyes narrowed, but some of the rigidness around her mouth shifted. Julian started toward the elevators. For 3 seconds, Mara did not move. Then she followed. The elevator doors slid shut around them with a soft metallic sigh. The lobby disappeared behind mirrored panels and brass trim. Water dripped from the hem of Mara's coat onto the dark floor. Julian set her bag beside her. She looked down at the keycard in his hand. This changes nothing. He pressed the button for the 12th floor. Good, he said. I'd hate to think one bad reservation could make you suddenly like me. I don't dislike you. He glanced at her. Mara seemed to realize what she had said a second too late. You make liking you strategically inconvenient, she corrected. Julian smiled. That's almost the nicest thing you've ever said to me. The elevator hummed upward. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Mara rubbed her thumb against the side of her phone. Her screen was cracked in one corner, a spiderweb of white fractures she had never bothered to repair. Julian noticed that her shoulders had begun to tremble almost imperceptibly. He took off his coat. She looked at him suspiciously. What are you doing? Offering you the dry part of my evening. I don't need your coat. You're cold. I'm fine. You're shivering. I am wet. That is not the same thing. Julian held the coat out without moving closer. Borrow it for 10 minutes, he said. Tomorrow, when you destroy me in front of a boardroom, I would prefer you have enough lung capacity to make it memorable. Mara stared at him. Then, with the reluctance of someone accepting a treaty from an enemy nation, she took it. The coat was warm from his body. Her fingers disappeared briefly inside the sleeves. The elevator doors opened. The suite had one bed, one narrow sofa, one desk, and the kind of expensive silence that made every sound feel larger than it was. Mara entered first and crossed immediately to the desk near the window. She set down her laptop bag, pulled off her damp blazer, and opened her computer before Julian had finished closing the door. Bed is yours, he said. Desk is mine. Fair. You do not touch my notes. Devastating, but fair. You do not make this a story. Julian put his suitcase near the sofa. Mara, I promise you, this is not the seductive beginning of anything. She looked at him over the top of her laptop. Good. He loosened his tie. You're very convincing when you say that. Her stare sharpened. Julian lifted both hands. Work. We're working. The suite's air conditioning coughed once and then sent out a weak burst of heat that smelled faintly of dust. Mara did not answer. She had already pulled up the client deck. Hudson and Pike had been chasing the account for 6 months, a national wellness technology company that had made a fortune selling sleek devices and calm promises to people whose lives did not feel calm at all. Their new campaign was supposed to convince consumers that the company understood loneliness, stress, fractured attention, the silent exhaustion of modern life. Mara had hated the first version of the pitch. Julian had loved parts of it. Which was why they had spent the past 2 weeks disagreeing in conference rooms, over late-night emails, beside elevator doors, and once outside a coffee shop in Manhattan where Mara had told him his opening language was dangerously close to perfume copy. He had told her that her strategy deck had the emotional warmth of a tax audit. She had smiled then. Not warmly. But she had smiled. Now, at 12:17 in the morning, she clicked through the slides with increasing speed. Julian sat on the edge of the sofa and watched her delete the same line 4 times. Trust begins with understanding. Delete. Trust begins when people feel seen. Delete. We are here for the whole person. Delete. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Julian looked toward the window. Rain dragged light down the glass. Beyond it, Boston had become a watercolor city, traffic lights bleeding into one another. "You're not editing," he said. Mara did not look up. "I am literally editing. You're punishing a sentence. I'm trying to save a presentation. You're trying to make sure no one can accuse you of caring about it." That got her attention. Her eyes lifted slowly. Julian stood and crossed to the desk, but stopped on the other side of it. "Dangerous theory," she said. "I've always had a reckless streak. You have a habit of confusing observation with intimacy. That's fair. You say things like that because people hear them and feel understood. Then they forgive you for saying too much." Julian considered her for a moment. "You think I'm trying to be forgiven? I think you're trying to win." The room went quiet except for the storm. Julian rested one hand on the back of the chair opposite her. "Maybe I am." Mara blinked. He had expected her to continue attacking. Instead, she looked back at the screen. "The problem," she said after a moment, "is that the client wants to say they understand people. They do. No. They want people to feel as though they understand them. That's different." Julian pulled the other chair closer and sat. Mara glanced at him. "You're not sleeping. You're not sleeping. I asked first." "So did I." She exhaled through her nose, annoyed despite herself. Julian leaned forward over the desk. "Explain it." "What?" "The difference." Mara looked at the slide deck, then at him. For the next 15 minutes, she talked. At first, her voice was clipped, professional, built to survive interruption. She explained how every company wanted to promise emotional closeness. How every brand now claimed it was listening. How people had become suspicious of language that arrived too quickly, wrapped too neatly, asking for trust before proving it deserved any. Julian listened. Not half listened while planning a better line. Actually listened. At some point, Mara stopped looking at the slides. "You can't tell people you understand them," she said. "Not when the whole reason they are exhausted is because no one waits long enough to hear the complicated version." Julian's fingers tapped once against the table. "Say that again." Mara frowned. "Which part?" "The last part. No one waits long enough to hear the complicated version." He reached for his notebook. Mara watched him write. "Real trust," Julian said slowly, "comes from being willing to stay for the complicated answer." Her expression changed. Not softened. Not entirely. But shifted. "That's almost good," she said. "Almost? Don't get emotional. You still overuse the word real." Julian smiled. "There she is. They worked until after 2. The pitch became something different beneath their hands. Mara rebuilt the strategy around honesty instead of reassurance. Julian stripped away the polished slogans and replaced them with language that sounded less like a company speaking from a stage and more like a person pulling up a chair. At 1:30, Julian noticed that Mara's coffee had gone cold. He walked to the small hotel kitchen, filled the kettle, found 2 paper cups, and returned with hot water and a single tea bag he could locate in a polished wooden box. Mara looked at the cup he placed beside her laptop. "Tea?" she asked. "It was that or chamomile." "You say that like chamomile committed a crime. Chamomile knows what it did." Her mouth almost moved. She looked down before he could be certain. Their hands reached for the trackpad at the same time. Her fingers brushed his. It was barely a touch. Still, Mara pulled back as if the desk had sparked. Julian's hand remained where it was for a second longer. Then he moved it away. Neither of them spoke. The storm continued its patient assault on the city. By 7 in the morning, the rain had thinned from violence into a gray, unsteady curtain. Mara stood by the window in a white shirt and dark trousers, her hair tied back again, every visible weakness restored to order. The desk behind her looked like the aftermath of a small war: notes, printouts, cables, coffee cups, Julian's half-open laptop. Her phone chimed. She read the email. Her eyes changed. Julian, who had been attempting to make hotel coffee taste less like wet cardboard, looked over. "What happened?" Mara turned the phone toward him. The client had added a new attendee to the morning presentation, Evelyn Hart, the chair of the investment committee. She was known for dismantling agencies with a kind of elegant efficiency that made people thank her afterward. There was another message beneath it. The client wanted the opening film removed. No glossy storytelling. No emotional montage. No music. No soft landing. They wanted an answer to one question. Why should anyone trust us? Julian read the email twice. Then he looked at Mara. "Well," he said, "at least they're asking the easy questions." She took the phone back. "We need to rebuild the opening." "We already did." "No, we built a campaign. Now we need to build a defense." Julian set 2 plates on the desk. Breakfast had arrived while they were reading the email: eggs, fruit, toast, coffee, enough food for people who had slept properly. Mara looked at it as though it had personally offended her. "I don't have time." "You have 12 minutes. I need to work." "You can work while chewing." "I don't eat when I'm stressed." Julian pushed the plate slightly closer. "You can continue disliking me while eating." "I don't require emotional consistency before 8 a.m. Mara looked at him. Something in her gaze made him feel, suddenly and strangely, as though he had stepped too near the edge of something. "You do this with everyone?" she asked. "Do what?" "Notice when they haven't eaten. Remember details they didn't mean to share. Make them feel like you're on their side." Julian held her gaze. "No," he said. It was the truth, though not the entire truth. He was good with people. He had always been good with people. He knew the difference between a smile someone offered and a smile someone needed. He knew when a joke could rescue a room and when it would only give everyone permission to avoid the thing that mattered. But Mara was different. Mara made him want to pay attention in ways that felt less like skill and more like risk. Her eyes dropped to the plate. She took a piece of toast. Julian looked away first. At 8:40, they stood in front of the mirror beside the suite door, dressed for battle. Mara adjusted the cuff of her sleeve. Julian checked the contents of his bag for the 3rd time. Outside, the hallway smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and damp wool. Somewhere down the corridor, a baby cried. An elevator bell chimed. They had changed the structure of the presentation. Mara would lead the strategic argument. Julian would bridge the emotional narrative. Either of them could interrupt the other if the room shifted. It was a dangerous arrangement. It meant trust. Mara looked at their reflections side by side. "You gave me the hardest part," she said. Julian slid his laptop into his bag. "You're better at it. You could do it yourself." "I could." "Then why aren't you?" He looked at her in the mirror. "Because safe isn't the thing we're selling today." Her phone lit up on the console table beside the door. Mara picked it up. The message was from a senior partner in New York. "Boston matters. The board will be watching. We need to know who is ready for the next step." The color left her face so quickly Julian almost missed it. "What is it?" he asked. "Nothing. Mara. Nothing you can fix." She slipped the phone into her bag. The elevator arrived. For the first time since they had entered the suite, Julian did not make a joke. Inside the elevator, Mara's laptop bag slid from her shoulder. Julian caught it before it hit the floor. His hand stopped just before brushing hers as he returned it. Her eyes went to that small distance. "You really trust me with half the meeting?" she asked. Julian looked at her. "I trust you with the half that matters most." The elevator doors opened onto the lobby. For 1 second, Mara did not move. Then she stepped forward. Julian followed her into the rain-bright morning. The client headquarters occupied 3 gray glass floors above a bank in the financial district. The conference room overlooked the city, but the view was nearly erased by weather. Rain pressed against the windows in silver rivers. A long table sat beneath recessed lights, surrounded by people in dark suits with cold coffee in front of them. Evelyn Hart sat at the far end. She was in her late 50s, elegantly dressed, white hair cut close to her jaw. Her expression gave nothing away. The presentation began. Julian delivered the first line. "Most companies begin by asking consumers to trust them. We think that may be the wrong place to start." Evelyn's eyes lifted. Mara took the next slide. "People do not distrust brands because they dislike being persuaded," she said. "They distrust them because they are tired of being simplified." The room went still. For 10 minutes, they moved through the deck with a rhythm they had not possessed 2 days earlier. Mara named the risk. Julian translated its consequence. Mara exposed the weakness in the client's current language. Julian offered a way forward. Then Evelyn leaned back in her chair. "So which of you is actually responsible for this account?" she asked. The question was cleanly spoken. It was also a trap. Julian felt Mara go still beside him. If he answered first, he would position himself as the authority. If Mara lunged to answer, she would appear defensive. The entire room waited. Julian looked at Evelyn. "Fortunately," he said, "you don't need to choose between us." A few brows lifted. He turned slightly toward Mara, took the presentation remote from the table, and held it out to her. "I build language people want to listen to," he said. "Mara makes sure it deserves to be heard." The remote touched her palm. Julian stepped back. Mara looked at him once. Then she faced the room. "Our problem," she said, "is not that people need more emotional marketing. It's that they have learned to recognize when someone is trying to use emotion as a shortcut." She did not rush. She did not apologize for the complexity. She spoke about trust as behavior, not branding. About the danger of companies claiming intimacy they had not earned. About what it would mean to admit uncertainty instead of hiding it behind a polished campaign. Julian watched the room change around her. Evelyn Hart began taking notes. When Mara paused, Julian picked up the thread with one sentence. "People don't need a brand to tell them their lives are difficult," he said. "They need proof that someone will still be listening after the easy answer runs out." Mara's eyes flicked toward him. It lasted less than a second. It was enough. At the end of the presentation, Evelyn folded her hands. You are closer than most agencies get, she said. But I want to see whether you can hold this position when it costs you something. Julian felt the air in the room tighten. Tonight, Evelyn continued, at the board dinner, we're going to give you a real-world crisis scenario. No slides. No prepared video. You'll have to respond in the room. She looked between them. If you can do that, the account may be yours. Outside, rain dragged light down the windows. Mara closed her laptop. Her hands were steady. Julian knew better than to mistake that for ease. They returned to the hotel shortly after 4. The suite looked altered by afternoon. The storm had deepened again. The unmade bed, the cold coffee cups, the scattered notes all seemed to belong to a different version of them. Mara set down her bag and looked at the clock. We have 3 hours. We have 3 hours and 19 minutes. Thank you, Julian. Your contribution to time itself is invaluable. I bring range. They worked through the crisis scenario the client had sent, an online backlash accusing the company of packaging anxiety as a product. A viral video. An angry customer. A founder who wanted to release a statement too quickly. Mara rebuilt the response from the ground up. Julian paced beside the window, testing language aloud. At some point, Mara sat on the edge of the bed to review a set of notes. At some point after that, she stopped answering him. Julian turned. Her head had fallen slightly forward. Her pen rested against her thigh. Her eyes were closed. He stood still. Mara? No response. The tension had simply left her body all at once, like a wire cut. Julian lowered the volume on his phone and crossed the room quietly. He took the notes from her hand before they slipped to the carpet. Her phone had fallen beside the bed. He picked it up and placed it on the nightstand. She shifted under the movement but did not wake. A few minutes later, Julian went downstairs through the side entrance and found a tiny bakery still open beneath a striped awning. He came back with lemon cake, peppermint tea, and a bag of sugar packets he did not need but had taken because the woman behind the counter had looked at him with sympathy. When he returned, Mara had curled on her side beneath the blanket. He set the food down. Then she said it. I know I'm not good enough. Don't leave because I'm difficult. Now, as the rain softened against the window, Mara began to wake. Her eyes opened slowly. For a second, she looked disoriented. Then she saw Julian's shirt beneath her hand. She let go. The movement was so quick it made the blanket shift. Julian stood. You fell asleep. I noticed. Her voice was rough with sleep. On the desk, the lemon cake sat beside neatly organized papers. The room smelled faintly of mint and citrus. Mara pushed herself upright, one hand going automatically to her hair. How long? 45 minutes. Her gaze moved to the papers. You did all of this? I sorted it. You rewrote the crisis response. I put your ideas in an order that would stop Evelyn Hart from throwing a glass of wine at us. Mara looked down at the notes. There were marks in the margins, but the core language was hers. Her logic. Her structure. Julian had not taken over. He had made room. Her throat moved. Then she looked at the laptop screen on the desk. An email had appeared. From one of the senior partners in New York. Boston project complete. Please provide recommendation for creative director appointment. Mara stared. Julian saw the exact second she understood. You knew, she said. The room changed. He did not pretend not to understand. Mara, you knew this was a competition. I knew the board was looking at both of us. You knew they were planning to choose one person. Julian held still. The silence gave her the answer. She stood from the bed too quickly. The blanket slipped to the floor. You let me walk into this thinking we were building something together. We were. Were we? Her eyes had gone bright, but her voice was colder than before. Julian stepped toward her, then stopped when she lifted a hand. Don't, she said. He stopped. I didn't tell you because you thought I'd become difficult. No. Because you thought I'd stop trusting you. Julian said nothing. Mara laughed once, without humor. That's almost worse. It wasn't like that. You know what you do? She said. You make people feel safe. You make them think you are standing beside them. And then, when it matters, you are somehow standing exactly where you need to be to win. The words hit harder because they were not entirely wrong. Julian looked at the floor for a second. When he looked back up, he did not smile. I want the job, he said. Mara's expression shifted. I wanted it before Boston. I want it now. I'm not going to lie to you and pretend I don't. Thank you for the honesty. It's arriving at a very convenient time. I didn't tell you because I didn't want every decent thing I did to become evidence against me. She flinched. Julian hated himself for it. He lowered his voice. That came out wrong. No, Mara said. It came out honest. The rain filled the space between them. Julian looked at her, really looked. I didn't know how to admit that I wanted two things at once, he said. I wanted to win. And I wanted you to stop looking at me like I was someone you had to defend yourself against. Mara's face tightened. And you thought keeping the competition from me would help with that? No. Then why? He had no answer elegant enough to survive. Because he was afraid. Because he liked how she had looked at him across the conference room. Because once he had seen her asleep with fear in her voice, the idea that she might think he had used that softness against her made him feel sick. But fear did not make the omission kinder. I was selfish, he said. Mara looked away. For a moment, Julian thought she might cry. Instead, she crossed to the desk, picked up her laptop, and slid the crisis file into her bag. We have a dinner to get to, she said. Mara. I'm not missing the presentation. I know. I'm not doing it because of you. I know. She reached for the door. Julian picked up the final printed brief from the desk and held it out to her. The client copy has both our names on it, he said. I sent it an hour ago. Mara looked at the folder but did not take it. You expect that to fix this? No. Then why tell me? Because it's true. She took the folder. They left the suite in silence. The lobby was brighter now, filled with people in formal clothes heading toward dinners and late meetings. Rainwater gleamed on the revolving door. Outside, a taxi waited beneath the awning. Mara got in first. Julian followed only after the driver glanced at both of them and asked for the address again. They sat apart in the back seat, city lights running across the wet windows. Mara held the folder against her chest. Julian watched traffic slide by. At a red light, she spoke without looking at him. What do you want from me? He turned. Tonight? Not tonight. The cab idled beneath a red signal. Rain ticked softly against the roof. Julian thought about every easy answer. He let them go. I want you to believe I can stay, he said. Mara's eyes moved toward him. Even when you are angry with me. Even when you make it impossible to tell whether you want me near you. Even when you are completely awake and completely capable of seeing every reason not to trust me. Her breath caught almost invisibly. Julian looked back out the window. I know I haven't earned that yet, he said. But that's what I want. The cab pulled up in front of the client's building. The driver unlocked the doors. Mara opened hers immediately. Julian stepped out on the other side and came around the rear of the taxi. Rain blew under the awning in cold silver streaks. He held out the umbrella. Mara looked at it. You're not coming in. I'm coming in. Then take it. No. Her eyes lifted to his. You decide when I walk beside you tonight. For a second, the rain seemed louder. Mara took the umbrella. Then she turned toward the glass doors. She did not hold them open for him. But she did not let them close, either. The private dining room occupied the top floor of the building. Warm light spilled from low brass fixtures. Rain pressed against the glass walls. Around the long table, board members spoke in lowered voices over wine and untouched plates. The senior partners from Hudson and Pike had arrived from New York, dressed with the polished ease of people who had never had to drag a suitcase through a flooded airport terminal. Mara saw them before Julian did. One of the partners, Richard Ames, smiled at her as she entered. Glad you both made it, he said. We were beginning to think the weather might save us from a difficult decision. Mara's shoulders stiffened. Julian caught the line. So did Evelyn Hart. The dinner did not last long before the scenario arrived. A tablet was placed in front of them. A fictional social media crisis had erupted around a client's new product. A user had posted a video accusing the company of treating anxiety as a market opportunity. The video had gone viral. Employees were being tagged. Investors wanted a statement. A reporter had requested comment. Evelyn folded her hands. You have 10 minutes, she said. Tell us what you do first. Mara opened the tablet. Julian watched her read. She was good under pressure. Better than good. Her mind became clearer when everyone else became loud. But this was not merely a client test now. Richard Ames sat halfway down the table with the expression of a man waiting to see whether she would cut Julian down to prove she deserved the position. Then he asked it. Mara, he said, if this account can only have one leader, why should it be you instead of Julian? The room went silent. Mara looked at him. Julian felt the question move through her like a blade. He could have stayed quiet. He could have let her answer. He could have let her argue her own case, allowed the board to see whether she could take the room. It would have been the easier path. It would have been the winning path. Julian placed his glass on the table. I think, he said, we're making a mistake. Richard turned toward him. Julian's voice remained calm. We're taking a client crisis and trying to turn it into an internal elimination round. The room sharpened around him. Richard gave a small, warning smile. Julian, no, Julian said. Let's be honest about what we are asking. This scenario is about a company being accused of turning real human pain into a product. The worst possible response would be for us to turn real collaboration into a contest for a title. Mara looked at him. Julian continued. The risk analysis in this response is Mara's. The hierarchy of facts is Mara's. The reason we know not to issue a polished statement too quickly is Mara's. I can make a room listen to the answer. She makes sure it is an answer worth giving. Richard's expression hardened. Julian did not look at him. If Hudson and Pike wants a single person who can make this project sound good, choose me, he said. If you want this account to survive contact with reality, you need both of us. He turned to Mara. The table was quiet. He did not rescue her from the question. He handed it back. Mara looked down at the tablet. Then she looked at Evelyn. The first thing we do, she said, is not defend ourselves. No one moved. We acknowledge the criticism. Publicly. Specifically. We do not say we are sorry anyone felt hurt. We say we understand why people believe we used their fear as a sales tool, because parts of our language made that belief reasonable. Her voice steadied as she spoke. Then we tell people what changes. We invite independent advocates into the review process. We publish the work. We stop asking for trust as if it is something we are owed. Evelyn's eyes remained fixed on her. Mara went on. A single leader can control a crisis. But control is not the same as credibility. Credibility comes from having someone in the room who sees what you miss. Her gaze moved briefly to Julian. Two people with different instincts create fewer blind spots than one person trying to appear invincible. The silence afterward was not empty. It was the kind that came when a room had shifted without asking permission. Evelyn Hart leaned back. Then she smiled. Not politely. Genuinely. That, she said, is the first answer I have heard all day that understands the difference. The account went to Hudson and Pike. More specifically, it went to Julian and Mara together. By the time the dinner ended, the rain had softened into mist. Board members gathered coats. Glasses clinked. Richard Ames avoided Julian's eyes as he left the room. Mara stood near the window with one hand against the glass. The city below looked wet and endless. Julian approached slowly. She did not turn around. You really would have given up the promotion, she said. I didn't give anything up. You know what I mean. Julian stood beside her. For a moment, they watched headlights move along the avenue below. I want the job, he said. I still do. Mara glanced toward him. But I don't want it if getting it means turning you into a footnote in my life. Her throat moved. Julian looked at the rain on the glass. I have spent a long time being good at leaving things comfortable, he said. Making rooms easier. Making people feel fine. I didn't realize how often I used that to avoid saying what I actually wanted. And what do you actually want? He looked at her. You. Mara's breath stopped. Not dramatically. Not loudly. Just enough that he saw it. Julian did not step closer. He had learned something in the last 24 hours. He waited. Mara looked at the sleeve of his shirt. It was still wrinkled where she had gripped it in her sleep. You should have told me about the promotion, she said. I should have. You should have let me decide whether I trusted you. I should have. You are annoyingly good at admitting things once they are impossible to avoid. Julian smiled faintly. I'm growing. She looked at him then. The defenses were not gone. But they had lowered. Her fingertips touched the crease in his cuff. This time, she was awake. One day, she said, you may become tolerable. Julian's smile deepened. That is the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me. Mara looked away, but she did not remove her hand. A week later, New York had rain in the streets but not in the air. The storm had passed sometime before sunset, leaving the sidewalks black and reflective beneath the city lights. Hudson and Pike's office still glowed on the upper floors of the building, though most of the staff had gone home. Mara exited at 9:15 with her laptop bag over one shoulder and a folder tucked under her arm. She had spent the entire day in meetings with Julian. They had argued over campaign language at 11. They had agreed, reluctantly, on a presentation timeline at 2. At 5, he had stolen her chair in the conference room and claimed it was strategically positioned for creative honesty. She had told him he was impossible. He had looked pleased. Now he stood beside a dark sedan at the curb, holding 2 coffees. Mara stopped beneath the awning. Julian wore a navy coat and the expression of a man trying not to look as though he had been waiting. You're here, she said. I was hoping. For who? He held out one of the coffees. For a woman who still assumes I have an agenda. Mara took the cup. The heat moved into her fingers. And do you? Julian considered the question. Yes. She raised an eyebrow. That's progress. My agenda is dinner. That sounds suspiciously simple. I'm trying something new. She looked past him toward the car. No flowers. No dramatic gesture. No orchestra hiding behind a mailbox. Just a warm car, a reservation somewhere quiet, and Julian standing in the rain-dark street with coffee he had remembered she liked without needing to ask. Is this a date? She said. It is. A formal date? As formal as you want it to be. And what exactly does formal mean to you? Julian opened the passenger side door. It means you choose the restaurant. It means I do not use charm as a substitute for honesty. It means I will not attempt to win an argument by looking pleased with myself. That last one sounds difficult for you. I've prepared emotionally. Mara stepped closer. She looked at the faint wrinkle in his cuff, still there after a week. Then she reached out and smoothed it with her fingers. Julian went still. Mara lifted her eyes to his. This time, she said softly, don't sleep on the sofa. For a second, Julian forgot every answer he had ever learned. Then he smiled. That sounds like a very promising invitation. Mara shook her head, but her smile came with it now. Not a restrained office smile. Not a weapon disguised as amusement. Something warmer. Something chosen. She leaned forward and kissed him. The kiss was not born from rain or exhaustion or the strange, unguarded hour between sleep and morning. It was not a mistake made in the pressure of a hotel suite or a boardroom. It was clear. Her hand remained at his sleeve. Julian's rested lightly at her waist, waiting until she moved closer. When she did, he kissed her again. The city went on around them, horns, wet tires, distant laughter, light spilling from restaurants onto the pavement. But for the first time since Boston, neither of them seemed to be heading toward the next emergency. Julian held the car door for her. Mara got in. And when he walked around to the driver's side, she was still smiling.